In this exercise, I'm going to show you how we can rig a 3D camera, and we'll also be using multiple lights to enhance our visuals and create a really dynamic scene. To start off with, I have a solid, and this is simply a blue solid that I've applied some effects to. So I applied my CC threads effect as well as a lens flare. And this just gives the background a little bit more visual interest and a little bit more depth. The other element is an imported logo. I've brought this in from Illustrator. It is on a transparent background and it's just these shapes. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to extrude this element and give it some depth. Currently, if I turn this element and make it a 3D element, if we open up the properties and go into our geometry options, we only have curvature and segments. In order to be able to extrude this element, we're going to have to create outlines. So what I'll do is I'll right click on this element. I'm going to go to Create, and we'll choose Create Shapes from Vector Layer. This will make a copy of the layer, and it just has converted all of that vector artwork into 3D shapes. By default, After Effects is going to hide the original layer, which we don't even need, so I'll just delete that. It's already made this particular layer into a 3D element, and I'm just going to open up my properties. We'll go into geometry options, and as you can see, we now have the option to extrude this particular shape. I'll change my view to 2 views, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit on the top view. What we'll do is we'll add extrusion. So I'm just going to add an extrusion of about 100. And as you can see, it's making this particular element much thicker. We're also going to add a little bit of beveling. So I'll choose angular, and that is going to simply add a little bit of beveling on the edges. In order to really see the effects of this element being 3D, I'm going to need to add a light. So I'll go ahead and I'll go to Layer, New, Light. We'll be using a white spotlight, and I'll just go ahead and use the settings here. I'm going to click OK. And as you can see, as soon as we do that, we start to see a little bit more of the 3D. I'll move this light on top of the logo, and then we'll open the light properties, and I'm going to increase the intensity slightly. We'll make this about 120 to make it a little bit brighter, and then I'm going to change my cone angle, and let's make that around 75 so that it encompasses our logo. If we change our second view to Custom View 1 and zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see that our scene is a little bit more lit, but the edges of this particular shape are still fairly dark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding multiple lights. So in addition to the spotlight, we're going to add a new light. This is going to be a point light, and we'll make the color a purple shade. I'll go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to switch back to my top view so that I can position the light. We'll zoom out a little bit. I'm going to grab the X slider and move this over to the right, and then I'll grab the Z slider and I'm going to position this so it's right next to the shape. And as you can see in the top view, it starts to add more of a purple hue to this left-hand side. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this light by using Command or Control D. We're going to go into our light settings, and we'll change the color of this light, and I'll make this a little bit more of a green hue. I'm going to go ahead and reposition this light, so I'll use my X controller and move this over to the right hand side, and once again you can see that it's going to add more of a green hue to the right hand side. We'll go ahead and duplicate this light one more time. And for this light, I'm going to put it behind my logo. So I'll manipulate the position in Z as well as in X, and we'll place the light right behind the logo. I'm going to open up my light settings, and we'll change the color of this to more of a pink. Now, if we switch back to our custom view And let's just zoom in a little bit. You can see if I orbit around my scene that my logo has different coloring, and that's a result of the lights that are being cast on it. So we can really create some awesome visual interest by adding lights on a 3D element. I'm going to go to Layer, Camera, and we'll just reset our custom view back to the default setting. I'll also switch back to my top view so that I can better control the various elements. Now that I have my lights in place, I'm ready to add a camera. We'll go to Layer, New, Camera, and we're going to be using a 2-node camera. As you may have recalled, the 2-node camera allows us to have a point of interest, which is going to allow us to focus on a particular element within our scene. I'll click OK to accept the rest of these values. And here is my camera. You can see here's the point of interest. If we go ahead and open our camera transform properties and we reposition the camera, you can see that that point of interest is going to stay focused on our subject, which is what we want. Sometimes when you're dealing with a 2-node camera, as you manipulate the camera, you can have issues when you're dealing with a point of interest as well as the camera. To make animating cameras a little bit simpler and a little easier, you can attach the camera to a null element. This will make the 2-node camera work a little bit more like a 1-node camera, although it still will have the point of interest. But creating animations can be significantly easier if we attach the camera to a null element. What I'll do is I'll create a new null object. It's going to place this in the center of my scene, and the null object has no visual properties. It is completely invisible, so if we render our project, it's not going to show up. Nulls are really great for parenting and for creating a camera controller. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer Camera Controller. And then what we'll do is we'll make this layer 3D and we'll parent the camera to the camera controller. Now what's going to happen is that if I move my camera controller, so if I make any changes to position or to the rotation or anything, it is going to be controlling my camera, which is exactly what we want. What we'll do to begin with is we're going to move our playback head out to about 1 second. This is the view that I want at 1 second. So I'm going to turn on keyframing for position. And just to make things easier, I'm going to tap P to collapse those other properties so I don't accidentally move them. Then we'll move back to 1 second and we're going to position the camera in the Y value. And I'm just going to move the Y value of this particular element down so that the logo is completely off of the stage. If we play our animation, you'll see that the logo is going to appear on the stage, as we would expect it to. I did want to point out that currently I am viewing my active camera in half resolution. This allows our RAM preview to happen significantly faster. If you are always viewing your project in full resolution, it can take quite a bit of time. When you are in the process of trying to work out the timing and animate the various elements, it is recommended that you reduce your resolution down. And if you bring it way down, you'll see that the object is not going to be nearly as crisp and clear, but the rendering is going to happen really quickly. So depending on the complexity of your project, and when we add 3D, when we add a bunch of lights, this is going to definitely increase the rendering time. So while you're in the process of developing, it's recommended that you reduce the resolution. That's going to definitely help when you're trying to render out your scene and just check timing. Once the logo has appeared, I'm just going to have it sit on the stage for an additional 10 frames. So we'll create a keyframe there. And then we're going to go ahead and add our property of rotation. So I'll tap Shift R to add rotation. Because this element is 3D, I'll get all three of the rotation properties. I'm going to turn on keyframing for the Y rotation, and we'll go ahead and move the playback head out to about 4 seconds. I'm going to increase the Y rotation to about 359. So what I want to have happen is I want to completely go around my object in a full circle. If we go ahead and go to the beginning of our project and hit the spacebar to preview, I'll let this RAM preview so that you can see it play in real time in just a second. As the logo is rotating, you can see how the backside and the edges are completely different colors. That's a result of the lights that we added. So it really adds some beautiful effects to this particular logo, and it made something simple much more complex and dynamic. As you can see, adding multiple lights to your scene and being able to control a camera by using a null element can really benefit your project and make it much more simple for you to create sophisticated animations when you're working in 3D space.